Nothing we say is investment advice. Please pause on all 3 pages of this disclaimer and read it.
Good morning, everybody. Cowboy here. It is 8:30 a.m. EST, and we are looking at Bitcoin right now. We just had some data come out, and it doesn't look like Bitcoin was very affected by the data, so let's glance at that very briefly here. It's Thursday. Unemployment claims just came out, and it appears that it was slightly higher than expected, which is kind of a negative look on the economy. The FOMC, the next one is not until at least January. So, these kinds of things are probably not going to have a huge effect on the market at this point. We have the Christmas break coming up. Markets are probably going to slow down. So we'll just jump right into the charts, back into the charts, and we'll take a look at what's going on with the corn, as we used to say back in the 2017 days. We used to call Bitcoin the corn. Have no idea who started that. So Bitcoin's been doing its kind of Bart head thing that it used to do back in those days as well. This is very, very 2017 looking. When Bitcoin gets pretty quiet, what ends up happening is the algos kick in and they start to do what's called a momentum ignition algorithm, where they have the price go sideways for a while. And then just kind of, it's really there to build liquidity above and below price. And then you see these nasty little liquidity runs where they drop down, knock out people's stops, and then the price will go up after that. And it's really just messing with traders. So if you're going to trade Bitcoin right now, you got to be real careful in this low liquidity environment. You got to really know what you're doing. My algo is calling them out pretty well. You see here. What you don't see, though, is that particular algo, there is about a 1 candle delay before the signal is really very secure, very stable is the word I'm looking for. So it's better to wait at least 1 candle. Yes, you don't get into the move as quickly, but this algo is only available to me, right? I made this, and that's what I teach people to do, is how to make their own. And so I can have confidence in this algo, and because I made it. Went back through time and, I created it and all that stuff. In fact, if you look in the description, there is a video that shows you how I create algos. I even create one. And of course, you're going to have to test it to know if it's going to work for whatever you're trading. But you can follow along. I turn it into code. And I even show you the tools that traders are using to connect that algo to their brokerage. So it can trade while they're not at the computer. But again, this is more educational. The algo itself needs to be tested and optimized for whatever you're doing. But it is there. So go to the description, click on the link. There you go. Now, Bitcoin itself, if you look at the higher time frame, it's rather bullish, right? So we'll just kind of back out here. We'll take a look at the monthly chart. This is very high time frame. And you'll notice that Bitcoin attempted to top 120,000. And there are just on this chart 3 major rejections, right? These are monthly candles. Each one of these candles is 1 month's worth of price action. So with that, you'll see 1, 2, and 3 basically, I don't want to call them pin bars, or one of them is, but high candles. So I'm going to zoom in on that so y'all can see it, where price tried to rally up and got rejected. Now, it doesn't mean strictly that's the end of the bull market, but some of the other things we are seeing have that indication. Let me jump into the chat here. Okay, so, you know what? I did not turn on the private live lab chat. Let me just do that for everybody. Give me 1 second here. So, that said, that's the monthly chart just showing a turnaround in price. And then if you look here, there's a pretty strong support locally at about 75,000. In fact, that goes back really to February, right? Or really March, the beginning of March. So 75K is a line in the sand. And if price stays below that for a period of time, it's decent indication that the bull is done. However, at this point, we haven't seen that happen. And am I 50-50? I think I'm better than 50-50 that we're not going to see new highs, but there are some conditions that could lead to new all-time highs. So I don't want to dismiss that too easily, right? I don't want to also give away how I see these things, but what I can say is if you look at the daily chart here, right? So each one of these candlesticks is a day's worth of price action. This really looks to me like a bear flag, which is also a bearish formation. Now, it's not to say it can't gather some steam and pop up. It could, right? That's always possible. But the reality is that this particular formation, just in all probability, would end like this, right? That's how that would end. Now, if I'm going to go old school on the metrics, let's just say that 95,000 right here was the top. Right now, it might not be. There's a decent chance it won't. There's a decent chance it's going to go up and tap 97,000 or even 98 or 99. But let's just say that was the top. Then we could do a very simple look here, basically an ABCD, if you will. And if this were to break down from here, it would go all the way down below 68,000, really down to 67.7. Now, if it were to make its way up to 98-ish thousand in the bottom on that move, the deepest bottom would be 71,000. But we haven't seen that happen, and a lot can happen between now and then. We had an interest rate cut yesterday by the Fed. Some are expecting a Santa rally. Right now, the NASDAQ is actually down, and it doesn't look that strong. It's holding up, right? But it's hard to say what's going to happen with the NASDAQ because it tends to be artificially held up with cheap money. But right now, if I were just to look at this as any other chart, I'd say that looks kind of weak, kind of heavy, like it wants to fall. Now, if the NASDAQ heads up, that means that Bitcoin is pretty much free to do what it wants to do. It doesn't mean that it's guaranteed to go up or down. It just means that it's free to do what it wants to do in this current environment. If the NASDAQ heads down, it's going to be very difficult for Bitcoin to head up because NASDAQ can act as gravity. But in the current environment, NASDAQ going up isn't necessarily anti-gravity, meaning that NASDAQ up, Bitcoin up. That doesn't necessarily apply. NASDAQ could go up and Bitcoin could just be kind of stable, which also is another indication that the bull market is over and we don't see new all-time highs. So if I had, gun to my head, are we going to see above 126,000 again? I would say not this cycle. But you know what? Bitcoin is a wily beast and it can surprise you. But as it stands right now, a lot of indications are such that Bitcoin is done with this particular bull cycle, right? So we can't count it out, but in all probability, that's the case. Sitting at 90,000 now, we might get another bounce, something like this, maybe, and then down. That's the most likely scenario right now. Now, as price goes like this, and if it does, it might not do this. It might go straight down. I mean, there's a million things it could do. But if it did this, as price gets higher and higher, I would be reconsidering my opinion on all of that, right? I'd be thinking, okay, maybe something else will happen. I look at the metrics, but for the moment, that's the primary thesis. And we'll have to see how that goes as it unfolds. So we have a little bit of time left. We talked about the NASDAQ, and let me look at it, on the algos. The NASDAQ could continue sideways or up. There's really not an easy way at this point to predict which way that one's going to go. And that has a lot to do with manipulation, which is just typical in all markets. Let's not, manipulation. Look, there's a reality to markets, guys. There's trillions of dollars at stake, definitely billions and often trillions. So if you think that like the masters of the universe are not going to push whatever buttons they got to push to keep things going as long as they can, then they will. The real question is, and I'll leave everybody here on the public YouTube with my thesis about the main market, the traditional market, TradFi as we call it. My thesis is that right now the Republicans are in charge. Slim majority in the House, we got the presidency, all that. And in the optimal scenario for the Republicans, right? And I'm not a Republican, actually, not even a registered one. But I tend to be more conservative than not, right? The thesis on the market is that if they're doing the math, and the math says that they have a good chance of being able to hold the market up through the midterms, then they will. If they're doing the math and they feel that it's not possible to hold the market up through the midterms, then there's a decent chance they're going to let it fall. And then there's a lot of different scenarios there. Is it going to fall to a certain level and then they bring it back up? Is it going to fall really deep and then they can't do anything about it? And that's that. There's a lot of questions there. You have silver at all-time highs here. That should be telling you a lot. When gold itself is going sideways, but it also had a huge run this year. I think what did it double this year? It went from not quite double, but almost there. It went from $2,600 an ounce to $4,200. I don't know, what is that, an 85% gain? It's huge. Silver, forget about it. Silver started out 2025 at that $30, $29.2, and it's already above 62. Silver is more than doubled in this year, just this year. Not to mention all the moves it made in prior years. Since let me see, this is 2023. So 2020's low was around $11 during the pandemic when everything crashed, right? And if you got in 2022, you could have gotten in around like $17. So silver is definitely, as V said, is going gay. That's what V says. Silver is going gay. It's spawning the boa and marching down the street. What's up, V? How you doing, man?
Hey, good morning. Yes, that is the signal, folks, that it's a very strong, very bullish.
Very bullish. Yeah, that's when it goes gay, then that's it.
Exactly.
When it goes gay, then it's a day, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So, but we were just talking about like the thesis of 2026. Like, if the Republicans have the money to hold the market up, they will, and if they don't, then oh boy, who knows what's going to happen, right? The market will fall, and then it's going to fall to a certain point, and will they let it fall? Who knows? That at that point, the possibilities are endless, and not too many of them look good for the bulls. Now, the reality is that a massive market correction would actually be good for the real economy, right? Whatever's left of it. I mean, if they were to allow markets to correct and just get all the leverage out of the system, oh man, what's the Dow at now? I'm just gonna like throw some numbers out there. There's some random numbers. Dow's at 48,000. I bet you the Dow would go down to 12,000. If they really let it fall to where it needs to fall, the Dow probably would go down to like 12,000. Just get the leverage out, everything. You're talking about the economy's wrecked. People are dying. Like, the whole Bill Murray quote that Velas likes to reference: dogs and cats living together. They're not going to let that happen. They'll let it fall to a point, but if anything, they'll catch it and force it up. And then then we're in another scenario. We're in an inflationary scenario. So, I would say the one thing that's probably going to happen in 2026, the one thing I would bet on is volatility, downside or upside. And we like volatility at Algo Factory, don't we, V?
Volatility is our friend.
Mm-hmm. Up or down, we make money. It's the thing to understand about Algo Factory. If you're a trader, those of us who are trading in Algo Factory, there are those who just want to hear what we talk about, and that's cool too. But if you're actually here building an algo and trading, then you're in a scenario where you can make a lot of money in volatility, whether the price is going up or down. And that's why I'm a forex trader primarily. I like to trade crypto. I like to hold crypto. I like to buy it when it's really, really cheap and then sell it after it goes up a while. And I don't worry about trying to nail the top either, do I? So, View the Gorilla, can you get us over to the private lab, sir?
Absolutely, guys. Wait, listen, here's the deal. Don't wonder if this is for you. Join the most prolific trading community on God's green earth, where you understand not only the things that are happening in the market, but how the global paradigm is affecting the market, how volatility is your friend, and most importantly, how to build those algorithms that trade on your behalf 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, so that you can have a life. So with that being said, guys, follow us over algofactory.tech. Join us or die.
Join us or die.